Good morning, Linda.
Morning.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
All right. You're up.
All right. Thank you so much. So, my name is Linda Yang. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this. I wanted to share about how I became the Vice President of Marketing and Recruiting at Florida Strategic Insurance. There's a clash of identities that I wanted to share about. Um, we're a small business, but we've become a top producing agency in our county. And then with some of our companies, we're actually the top producing in the state for our agency. I'm also the board member of the Florida Hmong community, and then a founding member of the National Association of Asian American Professionals in the Tampa chapter. I have lived with clashing identities, and how does that relate to where I am now today? I come from a Hmong heritage. My ethnic background is Hmong. We're a small people group in the Asian countries. Our people started or originated in China. And so before the country came to be China, we had our own kingdom, our own language, our own culture. Throughout time, the Chinese people conquered our people, divided us, and we had just spread among different nations throughout Asia. My ancestors actually migrated to Laos. We're a third world country south of China. That's where my parents were born. And so, how does all of this work up to who I am today? In the late 70s, there was the Vietnam War, in which our people had become individuals who had worked with the CIA. And through that, we were afforded the opportunity to become refugees and come to America. So I was among the first generation born in the United States. My earliest memories, I acknowledge how different I was when I entered preschool. Nobody looked like me, and then I realized everybody spoke English. And so my first language was Hmong. It wasn't English. My parents did what they could to teach us. However, they never finished high school. And so imagine not really knowing the language of the land and then not really understanding what's going on. It was difficult for me. My toughest year I remember in grade school was first grade. I couldn't understand my English assignments. And so an example would be ball is to soccer as yarn is to blank. That's exactly what happened in my brain. I just drew blanks. And so I cried and I cried because I couldn't understand my assignments. I was fearing failure. There were no books at the time that could help me understand the American culture. So really, ball is to soccer as yarn is to crochet. But because I couldn't understand that, and there were no texts that could help me understand the American culture, um, I just really suffered during that year. I was introduced to Full House, Saved by the Bell, Growing Pains, Family Matters, TV shows that allowed me to peek into the American culture. From there, school became easier, and then I knew when to apply TV experiences to what I encountered in school. So you see the clash of identity versus the ethnic and American culture. It has always been an inner battle for me. How do I belong when I am torn between two cultures? And so many have found that the purpose behind gangs were a remedy for seclusion. If you're secluded, it often happens that you join others who feel the same way. The catalyst and the formation of gangs is usually oppression. Being a part of a larger gang can give somebody a sense of purpose and belonging. So similarly, the clash of identity was among Hmong gangs. Back in the early 90s, we had been in the United States for about 15 years at this point. Many of the immigrants and first generation Hmong Americans were becoming victims to crimes. And so our people started to drown in their surrounding oppression by the neighborhoods that they were living in. Many ethnic groups had their own community to help with injustice issues. However, Hmong people were without. And so in the West, gangs started to form to protect its people. And what was the purpose of that? It was to assist those who couldn't rely or relay the information to the authorities due to the language barrier. And so that's the reason why these gangs had started, was to protect the weak. I don't condone gang-related actions, but it gives you a perspective as to how Hmong gangs were formed at that time due to the clashing identities. This drove my parents to exit areas of a lot of Hmong populated cities. And so with that, we had moved far away from a lot of Hmong people. And so it allowed me to have a safe childhood to grow up in. I wasn't allowed to be too Hmong with so many people who were like me, but I also wasn't allowed to be completely submerged into the American culture of the classmates who looked like me. And so it was the fear of the unknown that kept us hidden from accepting the culture of our environment. Most of the childhood in which I grew up in, up until college, I spent running my parents' restaurant. And so this was a small town breakfast spot. It was bacon and eggs and a side of hash brown type of meal that we served. And we were the only place within a 20-mile radius of this type of restaurant. And so for 10 years, we served thousands of people in our restaurant who never shared our culture. I learned public speaking as a server. I also learned about sarcasm. And so my Hmong upbringing was more of a serious tone. Embracing core life values and applying them were the main goal for my family. I didn't quite understand small talk. And so I just really had a hard time. There were so many questions like, why is there so much chatter? Why do we fill up so much of our time with unnecessary issues? The Hmong people focus on the goal that was set upon us with determination and seriousness. The American culture was much more relaxed. So I always ask questions like, why did so many people ask about my age, my height, my appearance, what I like and what I didn't like? I just didn't understand why my customers kept wanting to have these small conversations that didn't amount to very much. And so Americans are very good at speaking about the matters of the heart. They prioritize how one is feeling. I noticed that our Hmong family, we only focused on what we could do and how much we were able to do in that day. And so reflecting on impoverished settings back in Laos, the third world country that my parents were from, it was a war-stricken land. My parents were so grateful to be in America. And so they really didn't give a lot of time to complaining or allow matters of the heart to restrict them from being productive and being able to move forward. Emotional issues were not an issue. And so grinding, keeping on, working hard, keeping your head down, these were values in which we were instilled upon when we were young up until we became adults. So we didn't have very many conversations about internal battles, issues that we were going through emotionally or mentally. So we just kept moving forward. In my role as the vice president of marketing, it requires public speaking. So a quiet Hmong girl with internal battles of clashing identities, I became a woman who would have to stand among Americans and give speeches, to have to relate to the audience, to seek to understand their world, to be able to bring about something that was of value. How is this possible? This was possible because I saw the gaps in which people overlooked. So what I did was I learned to assess and understand the situation. I learned to take the time to understand where the clients were not connecting with what I was doing, or in the industry where they were having gaps and they didn't even really try to assess and address these issues. I had discovered what these gaps were. I made it apparent to identify them, to make it obvious to my audience. I pressed into the pain points of what they were experiencing in their professions. And then I brought value by bringing a solution to their problems. The words that came out of my mouth brought forth an answer. And so very little of my competitors were willing to take the time to give the reasons for the answer, let alone do public speaking. But I would. What a normal American would assume as something that is minute and undeserving of time, I saw was a much bigger issue that needed to be addressed that many had neglected. So that's how I was able to move up in the ranks to becoming the vice president of marketing. The knowledge that I acquired from a previous corporate job, it helped me to translate those skills into the current arena that I'm in, which is home insurance with my day job. I created a sales structure that was a proven method to help with building the business of my agents. I trained them on how to identify the pain points of the professionals we worked with. They conversed in a manner of providing a remedy to the problems. They were pitching solicitations that didn't sound like solicitations at all. It sounded more like, I'm a resource for you and you need my help. And so here I am, I'm going to be the savior of the situations that arises. And so we were able to quickly grow from 400 policies per month. And over a matter of 3 years, we're up to over 1,000 policies a month. So right now we are the highest producing agency in our county. And with some of our companies, we're the highest producing in the state. I used my lack of understanding my surrounding to become a student to my environment. The years that I struggled to belong, I became, it became that the very innate ability to observe, assess, and apply myself in any given situation was what propelled me into advancing and moving forward. And so I was able to do all of this with an associate's degree in applied science, working as a dental hygienist. How did this degree help open the door for me to becoming the vice president of marketing? It didn't. I abandoned my field of study, and then I had really followed the true calling that I had. And so I found that many people who enter college, got their degrees, some of them are no longer functioning in those areas. And so I really asked myself, how many of us really understand who we are in our young 20s? I didn't. And so what had happened was throughout my life, after I had my 3 little children, I needed something that was going to be more flexible, something that was going to allow me to work and still be home with my children. And so I had stumbled upon a sales job in which I was able to do from home. Years later, once we relocated to a different area, I was recruited by a corporate company. And so they really showed me the ropes on how to fine tune my sales skills. The next chapter, I became a licensed home insurance agent, and then I tremendously failed at that. I failed because it wasn't something that I was able to do, sit behind a desk, multitask between several screens, send out emails, and have no social interaction in person with any people. And so I was terrible at that. It really was difficult for me to get through the day. But you know, the one thing that I was itching to do was, it was to have small talk. And so I remember as a teenage server, what I hated the most was small talk, sarcasm, crude jokes, comments that were just not very nice. And so it made me bitter. The thought of walking through the kitchen doors to have to greet customers and lie with a smiling face, it made me sick. And so regardless of what my parents, they never let me live and soak in those emotions. Emotions weren't much of a value to my Hmong family. And so we just kept plugging along. So what happened was I was dying inside. I was cornered into mental stress of the comments that I was going to receive each day that I had to go out there and do my job as a server. And so any joke that was said, was darts that were thrown at my heart and it stuck. And so one day I just realized that because I was dying inside, enough was enough. I couldn't get out of serving because my parents owned the restaurant. And so what I decided to do was I was going to fight back. And so if I had to keep this job, then I was going to give it right back to them. And so I prepared myself mentally with what to say and how to maneuver and what to do. And so I reciprocated jokes for jokes, sarcasm for sarcasm, rude comments with rude comments. And I realized that I slowly started to heal. I started to get my power back, and then I felt like I finally had a voice. The words that I was delivering had value. And so my heart mended, and I learned to deliver what I was going to say in a softer tone. I learned to have a better choice of words to be able to deliver what I was going to say, to bring good to those who were listening to me. And so from there on, I really enjoyed small talks. I became very good friends with my customers. I stayed there up until my college years, until I got married. And many of my customers were very sad to see me leave. But I started, and they watched me grow up from a grade school girl all the way into my adult life. And so it was that time in which I had to exit the bacon and eggs restaurant. And that's when I really understood who I was. Customer service is key in any business. And so the training that I had with my customers, it really helped me to understand different scopes of personalities that I would encounter. And so my desire to be in front of people and socialize allowed me to abandon the fears of public speaking. I used the chatter as a means to build rapport, and then it helped me to listen to the matters of the hearts of the clients that are speaking to me, understanding and assessing the issues that they had so that I could bring forth a solution. So in sales, most of us understand that if you can't connect with your audience, you are spam to them, right? And so I really had to identify the need for the product that I was going to be providing. And so um, I was itching to be in front of people. I was desiring to educate, and then I also had a love to help others. This helped me to fully commit to my agents in which I worked with. They love being behind a desk. I was their marketing rep. I was bringing in the leads. I was having the conversation, kissing babies, shaking hands. That's what I was doing. And so it really helped to grow their business. The issue was I was only one person, and we quickly discovered that the best way to replicate my abilities were to teach my agents how to fish. And so that's when I created the system with our sales training process. We had email scripts, phone scripts, we had marketing flyers, PowerPoint presentations, training manuals, the whole 9 yards to really bring in new recruits and get them acclimated with this process. And so with each new recruit, we're able to implement all of these processes so that they could get up to speed to building a successful career. Our small business, we're functioning out of a small, tiny downtown unit to moving into, in the next couple of weeks, a 25,000 square foot office space. And so right now you could only imagine that we're bursting at the seams in our current office, trying to find enough space for everybody to be in a setting where they're comfortable and they can make calls and they can help our customers. And so it was the challenges of my clashing identities that really helped me to have the emotional IQ on how to maneuver with so many different personalities. It was the lack of my understanding my assignments that equipped me to target overlooked issues where my audience wouldn't connect with them. It was my parents who wouldn't let me quit my serving job at the restaurant that forced me to break into conversing with strangers and breaking out of my shell so that I could find confidence in speaking in front of people. And so that's where I found my love of small talks with people and bring forth good to their problems. And that's how I became the vice president of marketing and recruiting at my agency. All of the professional skills that I had learned, it also translated into my role as the current board member of the Florida Hmong community. And then I was also a founding member of the National Association of Asian American Professionals in Tampa. And so can you guess what titles I held in both organizations? Marketing. And so that's why I wanted to share with you today. That's how I was able to move into the roles that I have today. And I'm very, very thankful for the history and the upbringing that allowed me to be here now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Linda. That was such a powerful, powerful story.